They like it. I don't know if they're huge fans. You know, it's a funny thing, I think, when your dad plays music, or your mom acts. You know, they're probably very proud of what we do.
Something about Keith Urban doesn't feel the same anymore, and people are starting to notice. Keith Urban was living the kind of life most people only imagine, and the next, something shifted in a way that left even longtime fans doing a double take. He's always been the steady one, the calm presence, the man who seemed to have it all figured out. But lately, there's been a quiet transformation unfolding. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The energy, the choices, the way he carries himself now. It all feels different. And the truth behind that shift? It's far more unexpected than anyone realized. So the question is, what really changed? And why now? His greatest comeback. January 6, 2026, marked the official close of a long chapter in Keith Urban's life. The divorce that had captured headlines and fueled speculation was finalized, leaving him free, but also facing the reality of rebuilding. After 19 years of putting family first, Keith suddenly had to carve space for himself again, emotionally, professionally, and physically. Weeks later, he made a choice that surprised many. Instead of diving straight into stadium tours or high-profile events, he joined the top-shelf country cruise aboard the Celebrity Reflection from late February to early March. Performing for roughly 1,100 passengers alongside Lee Brice and Scotty McCreery, Keith traded arenas for intimate stages under open skies in Nassau. At first glance, a cruise ship gig might seem modest for a superstar, but insiders explain it was practical. Cruise ships aren't the dream gig, one source said, but they pay the bills and give him something to focus on. For Keith, this wasn't a step backward. It was structure, routine, and connection. Fans on board noticed something different. The energy was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. Photos and videos showed Keith's toned, tattooed torso front and center, not just for show, but as armor for this fresh start. Here was a performer stripped of expectation, directly connecting with his audience in a way that massive arenas often make impossible. The cruise performances kept him grounded, but a major change was happening behind the scenes. Keith broke up with his longtime manager, Gary Borman, after 25 years of working together. Borman retired, and Keith joined Crush Management in February 2026. This strong team handles artists like Miley Cyrus, Green Day, and Sia, adding pop rock elements to Keith's country roots. He had new partners, new ways of doing things, and a creative space that made him want to try new things for the first time in decades. At the same time, Keith started to fix up his Nashville studio. It was evident what he meant. He was getting ready to compose music that was raw, genuine, and free, like this new stage of life. At the country radio seminar in March, he revealed a bombshell. His next project would be a covers album with a theme glorifying yacht rock from the 1970s and 1980s. It would have one original song and maybe some collaborations with Little Big Town and John Mayer. At first, fans thought it was a prank and laughed. No, it wasn't. This wasn't a safe, planned undertaking. It was an artistic risk that showed a man who wasn't afraid to try new sounds after getting divorced and changing his life. The change on the outside was like the change on the inside. Keith looked thinner and sharper, and he seemed more sure of himself. The tattooed torso, which used to be a personal symbol, had become a public statement, a visual reminder of strength and putting oneself first. Keith had always put others first, family, work, and fans. Now he was putting himself first. Fitness, grooming, and style weren't just for show. They were armor for this reset, a way to show that he was ready to tackle the following chapter head-on. The difference is what makes this reset humbling. Keith didn't care about his ego when he went from sold-out stadiums to a cruise ship stage. It might not have been as exciting as a tour to play for 1,100 people beneath the stars, but it gave him something bigger: perspective, focus, and a reminder of why he liked music in the first place. Keith could connect, create, and breathe here, free from the cameras and the press's wild ideas. This part of Keith's life isn't the worst. It's planned, intentional, and empowering. After addiction and tragedy, he's showing that you don't have to start over at the top to reinvent yourself. Sometimes you just have to go into smaller areas to restore your confidence, try new things, and find joy in the simple things. The cruise concerts, new management, studio renovations, and risky record choices aren't just actions. They are signs. Keith Urban is taking charge of his story, getting his voice back, and showing the world that a legend can rise again without a lot of fuss. One mindful step at a time. Fans, insiders, and onlookers are paying close attention. The man who used to put his family and job first is now putting his own health, art, and freedom first. Lessons from being sober and going through bad times show that you need to be strong, patient, and brave. This isn't a flashy comeback. It's a grounded, humble reset, a lesson in turning the ends of things into new beginnings. Keith Urban's 2026 shows that real power frequently comes from within, and that it's never too late to change your own story, even after years of fame and love. The change in Keith Urban's life in 2026 isn't the conclusion of the story. It's the beginning of a chapter full of possibilities. Fans can't wait to see what happens next, and the buzz is tough to ignore. There are already rumors of new music coming out soon. Some of the songs will be very emotional and will be based on his experiences and personal growth after his divorce. He is trying out new sounds by mixing country roots with genres that aren't usually associated with country music. This could lead to collaborations that even his most devoted fans wouldn't expect. Every move Keith makes shows that he's not just coming back. He's also changing how he does music and art. Touring is changing too. Keith seems determined to find a balance between big stadium tours and smaller, more personal gigs after the private ship performances. He is showing that connecting with an audience isn't about how many people are there, but about how present, energetic, and real you are. Fans are recognizing and praising that each show now has layers of meaning that reveal both his personal challenges and victories. Keith is completely focused on co-parenting Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret when he's not on stage. The divorce may have closed one chapter, but family is still important. People who watch say that the parents are taking a careful, balanced approach to parenting, putting quality time first while also handling a busy job. Social media makes every step bigger. Footage of concerts, behind-the-scenes looks at studio sessions, and fan reactions take over timelines. Fans admire his strength, celebrate his honesty, and cheer on his new direction. Hashtags are popular. Fan accounts show off his new look. And forums are full of people talking about how he has more energy and creativity. The main point is clear. Keith Urban's experience shows that you can always change your story. He shows that self-discovery, strength, and resilience can change even the most public and watched life. Going from addiction to heartbreak to a humble, planned reset. Keith is more than simply a country celebrity. He is a living example of how to change yourself in a real, focused, and heartfelt way. The roots of the boy from down under, who chased perfection. Before the fame, before the spotlight, there was just a kid trying to get a sound right on a guitar. Keith Urban didn't grow up anywhere near the world he would later dominate. He was raised in Caboolture, a quiet part of Australia where life was simple and predictable. Nothing about that environment suggested global success. Still, something about him stood out early. Music wasn't just something he liked. It was something he kept returning to again and again until it felt right. By the age of 8, he was already deeply focused on the guitar, not casually playing, but repeating chords, adjusting his fingers, listening closely, and correcting himself. While other kids moved from one interest to another, he stayed with it. Hours passed without him noticing. What he wanted wasn't attention, it was control over his craft. Every note had to feel exact. As he grew into his teenage years, that focus became sharper. He wasn't trying to be the loudest or most noticeable person in the room. No forced image, no distractions, just consistency. A wide-eyed, relentlessly ambitious kid with a voice that could melt steel and a quiet determination to improve every single day. He joined local bands, performed in small settings, and entered competitions not just to win, but to test himself. At some point, it became clear that staying in the same environment would limit how far he could go. The kind of growth he wanted required a bigger stage, a tougher space, and stronger competition. That realization pushed him toward one place: Nashville. Moving there in his early 20s wasn't comfortable or secure. It meant stepping into a completely new world with very little stability. No guaranteed opportunities, no clear path forward. Just a decision to keep going, even without immediate results. And Nashville responded exactly how you'd expect. It challenged him. He played in small venues, sometimes to crowds that weren't paying attention. Rejection showed up often, and not in subtle ways. Doors didn't open easily, opportunities slipped through. It would have been easy to take that as a sign to slow down or rethink everything. Instead, he adjusted. He spent more time practicing, focused more on details, listened more carefully to what worked and what didn't. He studied artists like Johnny Cash, paying attention not just to the sound, but to the emotion behind it. The goal wasn't just to perform, it was to connect. That's where his perfectionism became impossible to ignore. He didn't settle for songs that were just okay. If something didn't feel real, he reworked it. If a performance didn't land the way he expected, he analyzed it and improved it. That mindset kept pushing him forward, even when progress felt slow. At the same time, the environment around him demanded more than just talent. The industry expected consistency, presence, and results. Showing up once wasn't enough. You had to keep showing up at the same level over and over again. For someone already holding himself to a high standard, that expectation added another layer of intensity to everything he was doing. Even in those early stages, there were subtle signs of strain building under the surface. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, but enough to suggest that maintaining that level of control wasn't effortless. Still, he stayed focused on the work. Eventually, things began to shift. By the late 90s and early 2000s, his sound started reaching more people. Audiences connected with him, not just because of his skill, but because of how honest his music felt. There was something relatable in the way he delivered his songs, something that didn't feel forced or manufactured. That connection helped him stand out. While others tried to fit into a specific mold, he leaned into authenticity, and that made people pay attention. What matters here goes beyond the rise itself. Those years shaped how he handled difficulty, how he responded to setbacks, and how he kept moving forward without immediate validation. The discipline, the repetition, and the constant self-correction built something deeper than skill. When people look at the transformation happening now, it might seem sudden. In reality, it traces back to this exact phase, a period where nothing was guaranteed, and the only thing keeping him moving was his refusal to stop improving. Love, rock bottom, and the lifeline named Nicole. Everything looked perfect on the outside, but behind the scenes, things were starting to slip. By 2005, Keith Urban was rising fast. The music was working, the crowds were growing, and his name carried weight. On stage, he looked completely in control, confident, focused, and effortless. But off stage, the reality was heavier. Years of touring, late nights, and constant pressure had started to take a toll. What began as part of the lifestyle slowly turned into something harder to manage, with alcohol and substances becoming part of how he coped. It's easy to miss struggles like that when everything else looks successful. From the outside, there were no obvious signs, but internally, things were getting more difficult to hold together. And right in the middle of that, someone unexpected entered his life, Nicole Kidman. They met in 2005, and the connection was immediate. It didn't build slowly, it moved fast. People around them noticed how quickly they clicked. Two individuals with demanding careers and complicated pasts, finding something that felt steady. Their relationship quickly became public, drawing attention everywhere they went. But beyond the headlines, there was something more grounded forming between them. For Keith, Nicole wasn't just someone he was with. She was someone who understood him at a deeper level. She saw past the image and into the parts he hadn't fully dealt with yet. That kind of connection changed the direction of his life more than anything else happening at the time. In 2006, they got married in a private ceremony in Sydney. It marked what seemed like a fresh start, a new chapter that looked stable and hopeful. But shortly after the wedding, Keith made a decision that shifted everything. He checked himself into rehab. At a moment when his career was climbing, he stepped away and admitted he needed help. That choice surprised a lot of people. Publicly acknowledging a struggle like that isn't easy, especially when your career depends on perception. But it also revealed how serious things had become. And this is where Nicole's presence became central. She didn't step back when things got difficult. She stayed consistent. Keith later described her as the lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved. In multiple interviews, he credited her with helping him through one of the darkest periods of his life. Not by fixing everything for him, but by standing beside him while he worked through it himself. Recovery wasn't instant. It required discipline, setbacks, and continuous effort. But over time, things began to stabilize. The same focus he once put into mastering music started to show up in how he approached his personal life. Slowly, he rebuilt. As the years passed, their life together began to look settled. They welcomed two daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and built a family that appeared strong and connected. Public appearances showed a couple that supported each other. Red carpets, interviews, shared moments, it all pointed to balance. Their home in Nashville became a place away from the constant movement, a space that looked calm compared to the outside world. But even within that stability, challenges didn't disappear completely. Their careers kept pulling them in different directions. Keith spent long periods on tour, while Nicole's work required her to travel across countries. Time apart became part of their routine. The attention from the public never really slowed down either, which added another layer of pressure to everything they were managing. There were also moments that tested his sobriety. In 2013, another incident connected to substance use brought attention back to his struggles. It was a reminder that recovery isn't a straight path. Still, he didn't hide from it. He acknowledged it and reaffirmed his commitment to staying on track. What defined this period wasn't perfection, it was persistence. They continued showing up for each other despite the demands surrounding them. Keith supported Nicole through her career just as she had supported him through his lowest moments. That sense of mutual support became the foundation of their relationship. He expressed that connection openly. Through interviews, through music, and even through personal symbols like tattoos dedicated to her. Names, initials, visible reminders of how much she meant to him. It wasn't something he kept private. He made it clear that she played a major role in his life. That level of emotional investment made their relationship feel strong, almost unshakable from the outside. It looked like a story of redemption, someone who struggled, found support, and rebuilt everything with the help of the right person. Which is why what comes later feels so unexpected. Because when a person builds their stability around someone who helped hold them together, any shift in that relationship doesn't just affect emotions, it changes identity. And the version of Keith people are seeing now can't be understood without this chapter. The stable years. For almost 20 years, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman gave the world a picture-perfect story. Keith was riding high with multi-platinum albums, Grammy wins, and sold-out tours. Nicole had become one of Hollywood's most respected stars, earning Oscars and critical praise. Together, they raised their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and somehow managed to stay grounded with shared Australian roots. To anyone looking in, their life seemed perfect. Successful careers, devoted family, and a partnership that looked unshakable. But appearances can be deceiving. Because fame is tricky. It gives a lot, but it also takes. And for Keith and Nicole, the hidden costs of their extraordinary careers started to show over time. On the surface, they were thriving, but behind the scenes, subtle cracks began to appear. Keith's High and Alive World Tour in 2025 had him on the road for months at a stretch, and Nicole's filming schedule pulled her across continents. Friends and insiders later said their priorities began to drift. Keith was fully immersed in music, stage life, and the energy of live performance, while Nicole quietly wished for a deeper emotional connection at home. Long stretches apart, combined with the constant media attention, meant even small disagreements felt amplified. Even with all of that, they continued pushing forward, doing what families do. Keith kept writing songs that reflected love, devotion, and family, many with subtle nods to Nicole. At public events, they moved through red carpets with charm and warmth, effortlessly showing the world a united front. But insiders now say that beneath the chemistry and smiles, the marriage had been quietly fracturing for years. Things weren't bad, in obvious ways, but the tension was always there, simmering under the surface, invisible to most, but palpable to those closest to them. By 2025, the strain became harder to ignore. That year's tour felt like a turning point. On stage, performing hits like You'll Think of Me, Keith's energy had subtle shifts, small lyric tweaks, and a different intensity that fans began to notice. Behind the scenes, he made the surprising move of parting ways with longtime band members he had worked with for over 25 years. He framed it publicly as following his inner voice, seeking creative renewal. But those who knew him say it was also part of a personal evolution, a way to shake up old patterns that had started to feel suffocating after years of relentless work and personal pressure. Physically, changes were noticeable too. Keith, who had always been fit, became leaner. By the 2025 CMA Awards, he appeared sharper, more energized, with a bolder wardrobe and style choices that showcased his tattooed arms. Sources noticed he had lost around 10 pounds and hired new grooming and styling support. Observers wondered whether these changes were part of preparing for a new chapter in life, a response to stress, or a combination of both. The timing certainly suggested all of the above. Then came September 2025, the moment no one expected. Everyone assumed they had forever, but the couple had quietly separated earlier that summer. Nicole filed for divorce on September 30, citing irreconcilable differences. The public reaction was immediate. Fans who had seen them overcome addiction, build a family, and thrive in careers were stunned. It felt like the storybook they had been living in suddenly had an unexpected twist. The divorce process itself moved quickly, finalized on January 6, 2026. Nicole retained primary custody of Sunday, then 17, and Faith 15. Both parents emphasized co-parenting amicably, trying to protect their children from the public spectacle. The announcement revealed something essential. Even the most outwardly stable marriages can hide private struggles. For years, Keith and Nicole had worked to balance two extraordinary lives. High-profile careers, long stretches apart, constant scrutiny, it all silently accumulated. Reports indicate Keith pushed for the split, while Nicole had hoped to save the marriage. Fans who followed his 2025 tour suddenly read new meanings into his lyrics. Lines about love, loss, and moving forward weren't just songs. They were glimpses into the emotional reality of a life lived under extraordinary pressure. Looking back, it becomes clear that these stable years were anything but simple. Publicly, Keith and Nicole appeared successful, composed, and connected. Privately, maintaining that image required constant effort, emotional energy, and sacrifices from both. Every tour, every movie set, every interview and red carpet appearance left traces. Over time, the small cracks, the long absences, the emotional distance, the relentless spotlight, accumulated like stress lines, invisible from afar, but quietly shaping their world. What makes this chapter of Keith's life so important is that it prepared him for what was coming next. The discipline, resilience, and self-awareness he practiced while navigating fame, family, and partnership laid the groundwork for the transformation that would captivate the world after 2025. These years weren't failures. They were lessons in endurance, emotional complexity, and personal growth. They show how even the most picture-perfect lives carry hidden challenges, and how navigating them quietly builds the strength to rise again. Everyone assumed they had forever, until 2025 changed everything. The divorce, band shakeup, and lyric bombshells. 2025 became the year everything changed for Keith Urban. While the High and Alive tour rolled across the country, fans noticed subtle shifts in his performances. Extra emotion in familiar songs, unexpected shout-outs, and new lyric twists. On stage, he still smiled, still played the songs everyone loved, but there was something different in the energy, a rawness that hinted at a story unfolding behind the scenes. Keith addressed rumors simply with, Stop reading into it. But for those paying attention, the signs were impossible to ignore. One of the first major changes came in his band. After more than 25 years, Keith parted ways with key members, including longtime bassist Jerry Flowers and his lead guitarist. He described it publicly as listening to his inner voice and embracing change, a way to reinvent his sound and direction. Behind the scenes, though, the timing aligned closely with the private unraveling of his marriage. Losing long-term collaborators was dramatic, a shift fans could see and feel, and it mirrored the personal transformations happening in his life. On stage, Keith's lyrics began to take on sharper edges. In The Fighter, he gave a shout-out to female guitarist Maggie Baugh, a gesture that felt unusual and pointed. Meanwhile, You'll Think of Me included added lines like "stupid bull's tea reasons," which fans quickly interpreted as a candid nod to marital struggles. For the first time, his songs didn't just tell stories, they hinted at his own experiences, turning familiar tracks into intimate, if cryptic, confessions. The man who once sang about devotion and romance was now subtly narrating heartbreak in real time. The divorce itself was finalized in January 2026, following Nicole Kidman's filing in September 2025. Sources reported that Nicole had hoped to salvage the marriage, while Keith decided it was time to move forward. The legal process moved swiftly, including custody arrangements for Sunday Rose, then 17, and Faith Margaret, 15. Financially, it was significant, as is common in high-profile divorces, but more than that, the emotional impact was profound. Keith had to navigate separation while maintaining his career, public image, and responsibilities as a father, all under intense scrutiny. Physically, the changes were noticeable and deliberate. Keith appeared leaner and more toned at awards shows and events, showing a sharper silhouette and a new attention to style and grooming. Tattoos honoring Nicole remained visible, raising questions about whether they were reminders, tributes, or simply part of his story. The contrast was striking. The man who had celebrated love publicly was now projecting independence and resilience, signaling readiness to face life on his own terms. The unraveling also reflected a deeper emotional process. Keith had overcome addiction before, with Nicole's support guiding him through dark times. Now, sobriety offered tools, but the challenge was new: heartbreak, emotional loss, and public scrutiny. Every decision he made, band shakeups, lyric edits, physical transformation, was a response to this complex moment. It was a collision of personal evolution and professional reinvention, each influencing the other. Fans watching his live shows began to notice the intensity. Songs that once felt celebratory of love now carried hints of sadness, frustration, and resilience. Every chord, every vocal inflection seemed to hold extra meaning. The subtle public cues, shout-outs, lyric tweaks, and energy changes felt like quiet messages to an audience willing to pay attention. Many wondered if these performances were Keith's way of saying goodbye, quietly documenting the end of a marriage without a formal announcement. Despite the upheaval, Keith maintained a public calm. Interviews remained measured, social media was carefully managed, and he kept the music as the central focus. But behind the composure was a man at a crossroads, facing the end of a 19-year marriage, the loss of everyday connection with the woman who had once been his lifeline, and the challenge of redefining his life while staying in the public eye. For fans and observers, the most compelling question became, was this the quiet goodbye we all missed? Keith, the man who had dedicated songs, tattoos, and entire performances to love, was now in the process of rewriting his story. The 2025 unraveling was more than a divorce. It was a catalyst, forcing him to confront heartbreak, career change, and personal reinvention all at once. Every choice he made during this period, from the band shakeups to lyric revisions to physical transformation, demonstrated resilience, courage, and the beginnings of a new chapter. Keith Urban is turning heads like never before. Post-divorce, he's leaner, tattooed, and reinventing his music and life with bold new sounds and intimate performances. Fans are captivated by his fearless transformation and inspiring journey of resilience. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on Keith's incredible story and all the moments everyone's talking about.